So the title of our evening is The Dream Makers, What is Earth Up to? And the reason I titled it that is my understanding of the world is that humans are as much a part of Earth community and Earth itself as all other creatures, right? Our bodies are made of earth and water and fire and air. And as such, we are part of this dreaming, this imaginal creation that we call Earth. That is a living, thriving, eating, shitting, dying, birthing, bloody, beauty feast of evolution and transformation and gift and so in honor of that and wanting to point towards that, I called it What is Earth Up to? Because in these times we get sometimes so focused on what the humans are up to and how terrible or how difficult the humans are, which I totally agree in many ways. But we're not only difficult and terrible, we're also beautiful and beauty makers, as Martine Prechtel says. We are also, as well as those who tend to forget, right? So part of our being here together this evening is about remembering together. Remembering that we're part of Earth's dreaming, remembering that our consciousness is much, much, much larger than our everyday consciousness. Remembering ourselves into Earth community, remembering ourselves into the dreaming. That is this exquisite life, death, life dance. Yeah. And then we have the dream makers or the dream maker. And my personal feeling is that dreams are exquisite gifts and creations, love children of the mystery and of our souls, and that the dream makers don't really ever make mistakes with what they're gifting us with in our night visions. The healing that's possible, the guiding that happens, the exquisite and razor sharp mirroring, and the invitation into shadow work and also into our greatest gifts. And my experience can be found when I do dream work with myself or others through the dream time or with the dreaming. And so that's why I invited you to speak dreams into the field this morning or this evening, so that we might taste the beauty of the dream world together, like we will shortly in the story. In an animist world, the world is constantly in conversation. All the creatures are constantly in conversation with each other, and we might hear that and participate in that conversation. And one way we participate is in our dreams and the way that we receive them. And when we speak them, when we write them down, when we remember them, when we're grateful for receiving them, we say to Dreammaker, oh yeah, thank you, please tell me more, reveal more to me, reveal my place in this web of life, reveal my ancestral lineage, reveal what I'm here for. Some folks have, as you know, prescient dreams and dreams that are, oracular and showing us the future. And others dream of past, and others dream strange, otherworldly things. And I think probably since the beginning of time, humans have been curious about where they come from, dreams. And so this story is one culture's idea of where they come from. And this story comes from the Isle of Skye in Scotland, where there are beautiful, tall, craggy mountains, the Cullens. There's the red Cullens and the black Cullens. And there's a lot of legend and myth around the Cullens and around deer that live there. The deer are held in trust and cared for by the Kaliach, the ancient winter goddess, who is the shepherdess, the deer herder. And traditionally, folks would make offerings to the Kaliach, and she would be very clear about when one might hunt and when one is not allowed to hunt, what's required to approach the deer, and certainly what would happen if one was not respectful in their approach. So there's a lot of stories about folks disappearing in the Cullens, folks never returning, and hunters, people who are out with the wild ones, and a lot of them revolve around the Kaliach and her relationship with the deer. So we'll enter into this one's world, who incidentally is also the creatrix of the earth, the earth body that we call Alba or Scotland. She is the creator of the land there, and her body is the land, as is the case in so many cultures. So when we move through the story this evening, I invite you to move through in more of dream consciousness, where everything is possible and you are everything and everything is you, and your own body might remember being interwoven with the body of land. And as we move through the story, you might hear the story of the body, of the place that is the Cullens and the Isle of Skye. Okay, before we move into the story, I'm going to read you a quote. And then I'll invite everyone, after the quote, I'll invite everyone to turn off their cameras who hasn't yet. And I'm going to rattle us over the threshold of this world to that world, to the world of once upon a time. And we'll journey to the place, the home of the dream makers. So the quote is from John Keats. Negative capability is the capacity of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. Negative capability is the capacity of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. And so, my friends, I invite us to not reach for fact and reason, but to let ourselves loose in the realm of uncertainties and mysteries, and maybe even doubt. It was a day. It was a day of glorious sun. You know those days where the sky has that particular blue? As if the very air were blessed and alive, sparkling and sparking. The birds flying through, grasping and grabbing occurrence, high and clear above. It was one of those days where anything was possible. It was one of those days where you couldn't help but be drawn into the foothills of the mountains with baskets in hand to collect herbs and berries as the golden late summer sun kissed your skin. One of those days it was, and the girls, the three sisters, went running from the farm after breakfast, baskets in hand, kissing mother and aunties and grandmother and grandfather goodbye, tumbling and pouring and running and singing up where the waters flowed down. Up into the foothills to gather the healing herbs for the winter, up into the foothills to gather the blueberries. Feel and taste their sweetness on the tongue. Waited a whole year for this taste again. Whole body craving, whole body singing with the taste of blue on the tongue and the smell of sky blue in the nose and the eyes. The kind of day where the girls could only sing as they picked, full of joy. The joy of being together and alive. The joy of having not a care in the world. The joy of knowing home was waiting for them at the end of the day. The joy of knowing they were bringing home goodness and medicine and sweetness to their people. And the joy of freedom. Alone in the foothills, singing. oldest sister, the two others were convinced, had the sweetest voice, and would let her begin as they sang harmony to her strong and passionate singing. She was a brave one, a wild one. The one who always saw the sweetest berries just farther ahead. Most shining herbs just on the next bush. The one called higher and higher into the wilds, singing her heart out, not thinking about all the things, all the legends, all the stories her people had told about what could go wrong when one went too high in the foothills. Up and up and up she went. For the joy of it, the freedom of it, the song of it. And she didn't notice anymore that she couldn't hear her sisters singing. She didn't notice anymore that the berry bushes were long behind her. She didn't notice until the mists came in, as they always do when the foothills become the Cullens. She didn't notice until the mists rolled in that she'd gone higher than she'd ever been before. Silent, ears straining for some sound of her sisters, shivering in the mists, turned around, not knowing anymore which way she had come. The girl waited. Afraid. Now afraid of the creatures that lived in the Cullens. The unseen ones, the fairy people. The ones who would trick you into their world and you would never return. Hunters, wolves, wild creatures. And so she strained her ears to listen for any footfall, any sign she was no longer alone. But all she heard was the wind. All she felt was the mist on her skin. Cold and her fear. Her heart beat quickly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. What was that? What was that? Are those shapes moving in the mists? I'm sure I hear those walking. I'm sure I hear it. Who's there? And out of the mists, indeed, came a herd of deer, gentle and curious and slow, walking closer and closer to her until they had surrounded her. She breathed in their animal scent, smelled the grass-filled breath of them, looked into their large brown eyes, and she didn't move, barely dared to breathe. The deer turned and began to walk uphill, and because they had circled her, and there was no way she could leave the herd, she began to walk slowly with them. Up, up, higher and higher they went into the Cullens. She had no idea where they were taking her. And they certainly were taking her. The mists thickened even further. They pressed close. She could almost feel their warm bodies on her skin. Like the horses in her barn. Until they reached the pass. And as they began to descend, the mists cleared and they entered a glen where the sun was shining and the grass was green. And the smell of herbs and ripeness hung in the air. As she looked ahead to the mountains on the other side of the glen, she could see a waterfall and above it a cave. The matriarch of the herd looked at her and nudged her with her nose against her hip, with her nose and forehead along her arm. And then she began to walk, turning back to make sure that the girl was following. The rest of the herd went to pasture to munch on the sweet, fragrant, delicate tips of the grass. And the two of them walked up towards the cave. Where am I? Thought the girl. I've never been here before. I've never seen such a wondrous place as this. It's as if my heart might break open, as if I'd been longing for this place my whole life without knowing it. She looked at the deer, who continued to walk. And her heart gentled calmed. They climbed up the path, arriving in the cave, and just then the sun came over the lip of the cave and shone in, revealing two ancient humans. Wrinkled, their skin like the rock of the cave, dressed in skins of deer and homespun cloth. White hair, and as old as her great-great-great-grandmother would be if she were alive, or maybe even older. The lead deer, the deer walked over to the woman. The girl could swear that the deer was talking to her. And when the Ancient One's eyes flew open and looked directly into her, she knew that the deer had been talking about her. Immediately she stepped forward with her basket and set it down. "Grandmother," she said. "Grandmother, I was with my sisters in the foothills. We were gathering herbs and berries. And I don't know what happened, but I just kept climbing upward. Something was pulling me. The sky was so blue, and anyway, I walked into the mists and the deer, and they brought me here, or I don't know. Anyway, I landed here, and I have no idea how to get home. Grandmother, please take the herbs and the berries. Might I spend the night here with you, please?" "No," said the Ancient One. "You may not." Disconcerted and scared and disappointed and totally confused and overwhelmed, the girl stood there dumbfounded and quiet. "You may not stay the night," the Ancient One repeated, "but you may stay a year and a night." "Oh, I am old and weary, and I have been waiting for someone like you to take over my work here in the glen. You may stay a year and a night if you work. Otherwise, you need to go." The girl thought about her mother and her sisters and her grandmother and grandfather and the horses, and she thought about their farm, and she thought about her people and how she would miss them, how she'd never slept in a bed without her sisters. She thought about her mother's food and her grandmother's stories. And she thought about how they would miss her. And then she thought about the way home, the long, terrifying way home, full of monsters and unseen ones and dangers. And she thought, better to stay here a year and a day than to never return home at all. And she looked the Ancient One in the eyes, and she saw both kindness and immovability like the mountain, gentleness and something in her she couldn't name but was terrified of. And all she said was, "Yes, thank you." "This is my brother," said the ancient woman, and turned to the equally ancient man sitting next to her. The girl hadn't even noticed him before, so still, so concentrated, so sunken within he was. He sat at the edge of a spring, a pool of clear water. The water that slowly poured out of the cave, becoming the waterfall that she'd seen. The man did not look up. He sat, transfixed, looking into the pool. As the sun set, the ancient woman gave the girl something to eat and a way to drink that tasted of meadowsweet and nettle and herbs. And she showed her a bed of straw and deerskin that had already been made up for her, as if she were expected. And she slept, and she dreamed. She dreamed she flew on the back of a golden eagle that took her over the Cullens and down to the village, to the farms. And she saw her horse running, and she saw her sisters and her mother working in the gardens. And as she flew by her grandmother looked up and saw her and smiled. In the morning, she was awoken by the Ancient One, handed a stool and a bucket, and the Ancient One gestured for her to follow. They went down into the glen, down along the waterfall, eating berries for breakfast as they went, drinking water from the stream. Over to the herd of deer. And the old woman sat on the stool and put the bucket down, and each deer in their turn came to be milked. And when the bucket was full of fresh milk, they returned to the cave and ate stew of venison and wild roots and vegetables. In the afternoon, they went and harvested meadowsweet and nettle and boiled the milk and curdled it and made clootie, pouring off the way for them to drink for their supper. And when the cheese had been made, the bucket was handed to the old ancient man, her brother, who took, handful by handful, Clootie in his hands, and as he looked into the pool, he shaped and formed the Clootie into creatures, into birds. A golden eagle, a raven, a wren, an owl, a seagull, all the different kinds of birds there were. And all the while he looked, not at his hands, but into the pool. And each day it was so. Milking, cheese making, shaping. The girl noticed that in the evenings, after the sun had set, when she sat with the woman, tending and mending, the man would disappear out of the cave. And one day, the woman said to the girl, when she noticed her watching him leave, "Go on, follow him. Go and see what he does next with the Clootie birds." And so the girl walked behind him, not wanting to disturb. The Ancient One walked over to the far western side of the glen, where there was a flat rock on the edge, upon which he stood, looking out all the way to sea. And he took, one by one, the birds out of the bucket, the golden eagle and the osprey and the gull and the kite and the owl and the raven. And each time he held up the bird in his hand, and each time that bird came to collect its brethren. And when the bucket was empty, he turned around as if in a dream himself, not seeing the girl walking back to the cave. The girl didn't understand what she'd seen, didn't understand what was moving here. And so the next morning, after she had gone to milk the deer and brought the bucket back to the old woman, she asked her, "When I went last night to watch the Ancient One, your brother, with the bucket of Clootie, he took the birds out of the bucket and held them up into the air, and when he took out a golden eagle, the golden eagle flew down. When he took out a gull, the gull flew down. And when he took out an owl, the owl flew down." "What was he doing?" "Ah," said the old one. "He was calling the birds to him. Each bird carries a different kind of magic, you see. Those are the dreams of men and women and children and creatures. A dream of hope calls forth the dove. A dream of magic calls forth the raven. A dream of courage and flight calls forth the eagle. Each bird has their own gift, and they fly with the Clootie to the sleeper, bringing them their dream. We are the dream makers. And this pool is the pool of life. My brother watches the people, looks into their hearts, listens to their deepest longings, sees their hurt, joy, their love, and their pain. And then he crafts and shapes the kludi that he will send to each one. And so we craft the dreams for your people and all the people here. The human people and the fox people and the deer people and the squirrel people. And slowly the girl took over the work of the ancient woman, until she would bring the bucket of kludi to the old man who would shape the dreams, and she would watch him. And when she had time, she too would look into the pool of life, and sometimes she would see her own family there. And sometimes she would see others. And she began to understand things that she hadn't understood before. She began to hear things she hadn't heard before, until she could hear the waters and the deer and the green ones, the herbs and plants. She could hear them herself. One morning, the old one woke the girl and said to her, "It is time, my daughter, it is time. It has been a year and a night, and it is time for you to leave us." With great sadness, the girl rose. She hugged the man and the woman and walked down the path into the glen to where the herd was waiting. And on this day, after the old woman had milked them, they began to walk with the girl. Again, with her in their center, they guided her out the western edge of the glen, down a path she had never seen before, although she had watched the old man offering the dreams into the sky day after day. And they descended down and further down all the day they walked, until just before sunset they arrived at the shore. And although the sun blinded her, she saw suddenly a man rowing towards her in a coracle. As he stepped onto the shore and their eyes made contact, he bowed and greeted her and said, "I have dreamed of you for a year and a night. I have dreamed of you in the glen. I have dreamed of you milking deer. I have dreamed of you with two ancient ones. I have dreamed of you singing. I have dreamed of you for a year and a day, and I have fallen in love with you. And so today I made my way to find you." And if you would, I invite you to come with me to my land, Tir Nanog, and live with my people. And if you would have me to become my beloved, girl who was no longer a girl thought of her mother and her sisters and her grandmother and grandfather, and she thought of the farm and the horses and the village. And she knew she could not go back. She knew she had become another. She saw, because she had learned to see in the pool of life, that her path went on with this stranger over the sea to the land of Tir Nanog. And so she went, taking his hand and stepping into the coracle. He brought them away. And how they went and how they arrived and how they lived together and loved together, well, that is a story for another time. But be rest assured, they are well and still living in the land of the forever young, across the sea to the west. So this poem is called In Order to Perceive by Patty Ann Rogers. And it's about this negative capability of being in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. In Order to Perceive, Patty Ann Rogers. At first, you see nothing. The experience is similar to opening your eyes wide as white marbles inside the deepest cave beneath tons of limestone, or being awake in a dark room, your head under a heavy blanket. Then someone suggests there is a single candle, wavering far off in one corner, flickering red. You think you see it, as someone else draws your attention to the sharp, beaming wing tips, the white end of the beak, the obvious 3 points of the wild goose overhead, and the 7-starred poinsettia to the west, the bright cluster at its belly. You are able to recognize, when you are shown, the sparks flying from the mane of the black stallion, the lightning of his hooves as he rears, and in the background a thick forest spreading to the east, each leaf a distinct pinprick of light. Then you begin to notice things for yourself, a line of torches curving along a black valley, a sparkling flower no bigger than a snowflake, shining by itself in the northwest coordinate. It is you who discovers the particular flash of each tooth inside the bear's open mouth and the miners with their lighted helmets rising in a row. How clear and explicit, you tell someone with confidence. That ship, each separate gleaming line of its rigging, the glowing dots of the oars, the radiating eyes of the figure on the prow, the corners of each sail lit. Soon there is no hesitation to the breadth of your discoveries, until one night, during the long intensity of your observation, you look so perfectly that you finally see yourself off in the distance, among the glittering hounds and hunters, beside the white shadows of swans. There are points of fire at your fingertips, a brilliance at the junctures of your bones. You watch yourself floating, your heels in their orbits, your hair spreading like a phosphorescent cloud as you rise slowly, a skeleton of glass beads above the black desert, over the lanterned hillsides and on out through the hollow, stretching directly overhead. I'll read it one more time, and if you didn't catch it already, it's about the stars. At first you see nothing. The experience is similar to open your eyes wide as white marbles inside the deepest cave beneath tons of limestone, or being awake in a dark room, your head under a heavy blanket. Then someone suggests there is a single candle, wavering far off in one corner, flickering red. You think you see it, as someone else draws your attention to the sharp, beaming wingtips, the white end of the beak, the obvious 3 points of the wild goose overhead, and the 7-starred poinsettia to the west, the bright cluster at its belly. You are able to recognize when you are shown the sparks flying from the mane of the black stallion, the lightning of his hooves as he rears, and in the background a thick forest spreading to the east, each leaf a distinct pinprick of light. Then you begin to notice things for yourself. A line of torches curving along a black valley, a sparkling flower no bigger than a snowflake, shining by itself in the northwest coordinate. It is you who discovers the particular flash of each tooth, you who discovers the particular flash of each tooth inside the bear's open mouth, and the miners with their lighted helmets rising in a row. How clear and explicit, you tell someone with confidence. That ship, each separate gleaming line of its rigging, the glowing dots of the oars, the radiating eyes of the figure on the prow, corners of each sail lit. Soon there is no hesitation to the breadth of your discoveries until one night, during the long intensity of your observation, you look so perfectly that you finally see yourself. Off in the distance, among the glittering hounds and hunters, beside the white shadows of the swans, there are points of fire at your fingertips, a brilliance at the junctures of your bones. You watch yourself floating your heels in their orbits, your hair spreading like a phosphorescent cloud as you rise slowly, a skeleton of glass beads above the black desert, over the lanterned hillsides and on, out through the hollow stretching directly overhead. We are Earth and sky and constellations and dream. Thank you for being here.